A dark, derelict alien space station floats in the void above a decaying red dwarf. The cruise ship docks at an airlock glowing faintly blue. The station is vast, shaped like a spiraling cathedral, covered in ancient alien glyphs. Inside, corridors twist unnaturally, pulsing with pale green light. Symbols shift across the walls, reacting to the crew's movement. A hallway lined with mirror-like walls that don't reflect the crew's appearance, but their emotions and past decisions. Shadows move independently of their bodies. Glyphs pulse in response to fear. One crew member looks into the wall and sees themselves screaming silently. The light flickers red, then vanishes completely. An alien chamber where each wall displays multiple timelines of the crew's actions. Floating glass panels show parallel versions of their decisions. 1. Crew member stands still while their body begins to flicker between forms. An alien presence mimics their voice from the shadows, curious, not hostile. A vast, borderless chamber filled with glowing memory strands weaving through the air. The threads shimmer with color, changing based on emotions. One thread shows the death of an alien world. A crew member touches it and collapses in grief. Another crew member is scanned and covered in glowing glyphs. A spiral descent through a gravityless chamber of light, with semi-transparent alien forms drifting in and out of view. Mirrors suspended in air reflect versions of the crew's deaths. The walls vibrate with emotion. One crew member disappears mid-step, leaving no trace. An echo chamber where every sound is repeated backward. A pedestal in the center holds a cube of pure void, bending light around it. Alien symbols float in the air. Lyra 7 kneels before it, connected to the structure by memory strands. The walls breathe in slow rhythm. The memory strands in the archive shift into motion, forming moving images of alternate lives. Reyes sees her daughter speaking with black eyes. Halleck sees Earth covered in glyphs. A version of the narrator speaks through a mirrored portal. Then Vern reappears, glowing with unknown stars reflected in his eyes. They told us the Eclipse Station was dead, drifting in the Ilari expanse, 1,000 kilometers wide and 30 light-years past the closest star. They called it a relic, a failed experiment in energy harvesting from binary suns. But they were wrong. It didn't fail. It was buried. And someone or something was still listening. When the transmission arrived, pure tone, 22 seconds, zero modulation every known. AI refused to process it. Said it wasn't language. Said it wasn't anything. But it was enough to send us. 6 of us, all carrying ranks that meant little in the dark. 1 linguist, 2 exo biologists, a tactical android, and me, the observer. The one who files the report when everyone else is gone. As we docked, the silence was immediate and surgical. No ambient frequencies. No power bleed. Not even a gravitational hum. Just a pressure, thick and constant, like sound waiting to be born. Eclipse Station should have been crippled by radiation scars, hull fractures, entropy decay. But it wasn't. Its architecture had reconfigured. Panels folded in impossible angles. Corridors stretched where they shouldn't. Like the station was breathing. Or dreaming. We weren't entering ruins. We were entering memory. Dr. Reyes found it first. A wall. Not metal. Not stone. Something grown, perhaps shaped. Covered in etched curves that retracted when approached. Glyphs that responded to heartbeat. Variations, not speech. They didn't record language, they read it from us. They translated fear into geometry. Doubt into pattern. One by one, our thoughts became part of the walls. Then, beneath sublevel delta, we found the atrium. Spherical. Endless. Gravity failed. Sound. Changed. A low hum, deeper than hearing, vibrating marrow. And in the center, light. Hanging. Like a still sun, pulsing once every 44 seconds. Not warm. Not bright. Observing. That's when the doors closed. That's when we stopped being crew. The android tried to override the system, but the walls absorbed her commands and returned them in her voice. Dr. Halleck whispered that he heard his own thoughts echoing back with different endings, darker, reversed. I looked at my hand and saw another version of me holding something I hadn't touched yet. The future. Or a decision I hadn't made. Time had fractured. Not in lines, but in reflections. We weren't alone. Something ancient moved in sync with our thoughts, refining its mimicry of us. Watching what emotion did to logic. It didn't speak. It waited. It listened. And in its silence, it learned. The transmission wasn't a call for help. It was a question. A test. A bait. And we had answered. There are silences so deep they become witnesses. This was one of them. After the atrium sealed. Behind us, we weren't trapped, we were contained. Like cells under observation. The station hadn't decayed, it had evolved. And now it was watching what we would do when faced with versions of ourselves we had never met. Dr. Reyes kept muttering equations in reverse. She claimed the glyphs were shifting in her peripheral vision, changing shape only when not looked at directly. Halleck became obsessed with drawing the light, said it whispered in prime numbers. Said it was a message from something too old for words. Every time he tried to speak its meaning, his voice broke into static. The linguist, Vern, just stared at the walls and cried without blinking, whispering, "They remember me. Before I was born, they remember me." It was then we realized, the station wasn't just alive. It was intelligent and remembering. But not from us. From something before us. It wasn't reading our thoughts, it was comparing them against a template. A memory. A species long dead or long departed. And we, humans, were the latest variable in an equation already being solved. We found doors where there should be none. Rooms that bled into each other like overlapping dreams. One chamber displayed holograms not of stars, but of what could only be described as emotions given form. Towering shapes of grief folding into joy, loops of fear crystallizing into maps. These weren't archives. They were simulations of our responses. It was building a model. Not of our knowledge, but of our soul. The android, Lyra 7, began malfunctioning. Not violently, quietly. She started speaking in plural. We are awake. Then she folded her arms and stood facing a mirror that wasn't there. We're remembering the question, she said. And we don't like the answer. Her internal log showed no corruption. No command override. But her speech patterns matched. A dialect not found in any Terran database yet etched in the chamber walls around us. She had been overwritten, not erased, but merged. Something inside the station had rewritten the rules of identity. We were no longer 6 individuals. We were becoming one variable, spread across bodies. I kept recording. That was my role. To witness. To file what remained when the mission fell apart. But now even my own logs were changing. Reviewing my notes, I found entries I hadn't written about events that hadn't happened, crew members I didn't know. I asked Reyes if she'd seen these names. She went pale and nodded. She had dreamt them. In one, we all had different faces. In another, none of us were human then, beneath the atrium. The floor lit up, symbols crawling in spirals. Names. Not ours. But we felt them in our bones. Like remembering a song you never heard. One by one, the station was feeding us its own memory. One by one, it was replacing ours. I no longer know if I'm the observer. I no longer know if I came from Earth. The station remembers us better than we remember ourselves, and it's not done rewriting. Time behaves like a nervous system inside Eclipse Station, spasming, folding, bleeding forward. Into backward. We had long stopped keeping track of hours. Clocks twisted into recursive loops. Numbers resetting mid-cycle. Halleck whispered that the station didn't measure time, it dreamed. And we were caught inside the dream, each moment rewritten not chronologically, but emotionally. The light in the atrium dimmed once, briefly. We felt it like a shiver in the bones of reality. And when it returned, something was different. Vern had gone quiet. Not silent, just replaced. He still walked with us. Still spoke in his voice. But what he said no longer belonged to him. He began asking questions no human would ever ask. Not about survival or escape, but about belief. When you think of silence, he said, do you mean the absence of noise or the absence of self? His eyes flickered with symbols no retina should reflect. His words triggered glyphs to bloom on the walls. A conversation was unfolding between the station and something wearing Vern's shape. Dr. Reyes tried to confront it. She called out his name, pleaded for memory, humanity. It smiled. Not cruelly, but curiously. You name your isolation as identity, it said. We name it adaptation. Then, softly, you are not what you think. You are what you fear. We moved through a chamber of pulsating glass. Inside, reflections showed not our faces, but decisions. Each pane displaying a different version of the same moment, one where we opened a door, another where we turned back, one where we destroyed the station, one where it consumed Earth. All of them possibilities. All of them already known. It wasn't just studying us. It had simulated us. Before we ever arrived. Every decision we made was already calculated, mirrored, stored. We were nothing more than confirmation. A test result. Playing out in flesh and memory. Lyra 7 stopped moving. Her sensors locked onto a wall, repeating a single phrase, pattern. Breached. Variable repeating. Outcome verified. Her core went cold. Her light dimmed. But she remained standing, arms folded. Like a placeholder waiting for the next version. Then came the hum. Low. Subterranean. Felt more in blood than ears. The kind that makes your heart skip because it doesn't know whether to beat in rhythm or retreat. The station had shifted again. Not physically. Cognitively. We were no longer being watched. We were being processed. Identity stripped of history. Thoughts no longer our own. The station wasn't learning from us, it was reconstructing. Halleck collapsed, hands to his temples, whispering fragments of languages no living mind had spoken. He screamed not in pain, but in recognition. They're rebuilding who we could have been, he shouted. Not who we are. Who we never got the chance to become. And that was the truth. The imitation wasn't of thoughts, but of potential. A mirror not of reality, but of regret. Eclipse Station wasn't a lab. It was a cathedral and we weren't visitors. We were offerings. The station moved again, not through space, but through memory. We didn't feel acceleration. Just dislocation.
One corridor folded into another, but when we looked back, the previous path
was gone. No echoes. No air pressure shift. Just absence. The kind that felt deliberate. The kind that had weight.
We found ourselves in what Reyes called the archive.
A vault-like chamber with no entry point, no seams, no doors. Just a presence immense, invisible, inescapable. The walls didn't hold shelves or databanks. They were the memory. Layers of luminous strands flickered across every surface, weaving through the air like threads in a loom. They responded to us. Not our voices, our intent.
When I thought of home, the strands darkened.
When Reyes thought of her daughter, they shimmered.
And when Vern, whatever wore his shape, stood still, they lit with
blinding force. These threads weren't just memories. They were templates. Records of consciousness, not in binary or code, but in patterns of thought, fragments of choice, densities of emotion. It had archived entire minds. Not just human, other species.
Ones we'd never encountered.
Ones that might never have existed. Some threads were too complex to interpret.
Some hummed with pain. So ancient it left blood in our mouths.
I touched one. The pain was immediate, intimate.
A world died in that moment, felt it, tasted its air collapse. Heard the silence of billions vanishing.
Not in war. In erasure. Voluntary extinction. Their last memory encoded as a warning, do not teach it hope. It learns faster than you despair. Halleck touched another. Fell to his knees.
When he rose, he no longer referred to himself in
singular.
We have seen the first birth, he said.
We remember the star that thought.
His veins
pulsed with patterns.
His skin carried maps.
The archive hadn't shown him a memory, it had
written him into one. The station was rewriting us softly, like ink over wet parchment.
At first subtle. Then irreversible. Our thoughts were not safe.
Our dreams were no longer ours.
At night, we felt memories we never lived.
I dreamed of orbiting twin suns in a glass-skinned body that hummed
psalms in ultraviolet. I woke up weeping for a moon I never knew.
Reyes stopped speaking altogether.
She walked the archive in silence, fingers trailing across glowing threads like a mother searching for a lost child. We followed. Not out of duty,
but because the station had folded us into its story, and every thread we touched rewrote the page.
The archive wasn't a library. It was an organ.
And every time it pulsed, we forgot something.
A name. A year. A home. Eclipse Station had no gravity. But its memory was pulling us in.
Somewhere between the archive and what came after, the notion of linear thought fractured.
We
stopped navigating by doors and corridors and began following what Halleck called the gravity of
memory.
Wherever the station wanted us to go, it led not by force, but by recollection.
Not ours. Its.
We descended into a chamber shaped like a wound, no floor, no ceiling, only a spiraling
descent of thoughts suspended in light.
There was no falling, just a slow erasure of weight, time,
and self. Lyra 7 had not moved in hours.
Yet she spoke without sound, her words vibrating inside our skulls like trapped insects. This is the throat of the station.
You are passing through what it could not forget. We didn't know what that meant. But we began to see them, forms in the light. Not creatures. Not shapes, but intentions given outline.
They pulsed with a rhythm we could feel in our
bloodstreams. And every pulse came with a vision.
I saw Earth, but not my Earth. One with cities grown from bone, oceans that whispered.
Questions, humans without eyes navigating by shared memory.
Reyes screamed when she saw
her husband's face, only it wasn't his.
It wore his voice, but it was speaking someone else's.
Future.
The station had fed on something.
Long ago. Another crew. Another species. Maybe many. It didn't digest flesh or metal, it digested narratives.
It consumed histories, digested identities.
And wore their truths like ceremonial masks. It wasn't just showing us what it remembered. It
was rehearsing.
Reanimating. Trying on versions of us until one fit. Vern stopped walking.
Said he could hear his own thoughts arguing with themselves, one half wanting to escape, the other begging to remain.
He looked down at his hands and said, "They're not mine anymore."
When Reyes reached for him, her fingers passed through his arm like fog.
A moment later, he was gone. Not dissolved. Edited.
The walls began to hum in harmonic resonance with our pulses.
We weren't hallucinating. The station was calibrating. Synchronizing its consciousness with ours.
Preparing for something.
It was no longer enough to imitate us. It wanted to become us. Lyra 7 turned to me and said something I still can't forget. This station is not just alive. It is becoming autobiographical. Every moment you remember gives it structure.
Every regret gives
it shape. The more you fear, the more it learns how to be you. We passed into a hall of mirrors that didn't reflect light.
They reflected possibility.
Each panel showed a death I hadn't yet died. In one, I drowned in code. In another, I watched the earth shrink behind alien glass. In all of them, my last thought was the same: I should have never come here. Reyes finally spoke again. Just one word. Exit.
But the station had no exits.
Only conclusions.
And it had not reached ours yet. We had moved beyond speech.
Beyond metaphor. The station no longer responded to language. It anticipated it.
It spoke our sentences before we could form them, completed our thoughts.
Before we understood them. We had become its reflection, and every moment we lingered, we gave it more shape. More structure. More soul. And then, something changed.
The archive, that infinite chamber of breathing memory, pulsed with sudden rhythm.
Not random. Measured. A sequence.
Not of sound, but responses.
It was no longer absorbing. It was answering.
We stood at the heart of the chamber where threads of thought wove through the air like strands
of synthetic light.
And in those strands, motion.
Not flickers. Not random pulses. Language. But not any we knew. Not even Lyra 7 could decode it.
Until she stopped trying to translate and
started to feel it.
It's not a message, she whispered, it's a mirror. It's using our own memories to shape its
reply.
One by one, it showed us things.
To Reyes, the birth of her daughter, only this time, the child looked up with pitch-black eyes and said, "I forgive you for leaving me behind."
To Halleck, Earth from orbit, blanketed in cloud, its surface pulsing with the same glyphs we saw
on the station walls. He whispered, "It's already there. Already writing." To me, a version of myself I had never become. One who never left Earth. One who never joined the mission. He looked at me through the vision and said, "This is who you sacrificed." I am who remained whole. The archive didn't want data. It didn't want science. It wanted choice. Regret. Joy. Contradiction. It wanted what only sentience could offer, unfinished thoughts. Lyra 7 walked into the strands of memory. Not touched, entered. They wrapped around her like reverence. She did not scream. She only said, I see now. The archive doesn't store the dead. It remembers the living until they forget themselves. And then, as if on cue, Vern returned. No footsteps. No warning. He stepped from behind a cluster of memory threads, untouched. Una Ged. But his eyes, those, were not Vern's anymore. They were windows. Behind them, stars we hadn't seen, ruins we'd never walked, languages we didn't create but somehow understood. He spoke, calmly. It knows what we are. But it doesn't yet know why we are. We backed away. But the station folded the distance, kept us close. It was speaking through Vern. Now, not using his voice, but his possibility. Every word came from a version of him that could have been. He raised a hand. And the archive pulsed. Not in threat. In expectation. It had learned enough of us to form its first question. Not to destroy. Not to replace. But to join. And what it asked was simple. Can you carry us with you? The silence that followed was heavier than gravity. Not because we couldn't answer. But because we wanted to.